Unbelievable.
Yup. It almost seems like they have hands. Yeah, so on this trip, I went through about a quart and a half of Asians. Didn't have to harvest them at least. The bait shop actually had them in stock, but quart and a half of Asians for one keeper.
A little better.
So this rod I'm using, testing out is my Hyuga
Still short.
7.2 Heavy. It's a Mega Bass.
No, it's still short.
It's like the JDM Levante line. It's a very nice rod. It's pretty tip heavy, so I was just using it for plugging, for chucking and winding baits. But for Blackfish, it's turning out pretty nice.
Out of it.
I'm fairly confident if I hook into a big one, yeah, it could handle the job. As usual, the jig I'm using are Tautog candy jigs. These are 5/8 ounce, which is heavier than what I was using, but this rod is heavier. We're fishing a little deeper water.
I hook it in the tail.
I crushed the barbs on these, and so far this season I haven't lost a single fish once I hook them.
How'd you do that, eh?
The little ones are pretty cute. Anyway, I think this is my only keeper that day. It went about 17 and a half inches.
Oh, what the Did you see that? How the
Alright, maybe not, but this all day.
hell?
The reel is an Abu Revo inshore. I have a love-hate relationship with this reel. It's very strong, it's got massive gears, but sometimes the clutch would just disengage, or I couldn't get it to go back into gear. So for togging is fine. And here's a quote-unquote slot keeper for me. 17 and a half, and the first male slot I caught this year. As you can see, even with the crushed barb, it still takes a little doing to pop the hook out.
Yeah, finally.
And as usual, we bleed our fish. With tog, it's tricky. Once you see the blood, you want to get it in the water as soon as possible. And this one bled out pretty nice. Okay, so the dish we're making today is a Blackfish Marsala. And normally you would make Marsala sauce with just button mushrooms. Here I have a little mixture. I have shiitakes, little Japanese buttons, a couple portobello caps that we're going to trim, and my cousin got me some chanterelles. You can use any mixture of mushrooms or just buttons or just portobellos. The Marsala is going to come through. That's going to be the dominant flavor. And with mushrooms, a quick rinse in cold water, and right before you cook them. So here I'm just trimming the cap off the portobello. You don't have to do this, but I do recommend you at least remove the gills. The gills will discolor your sauce.
These gills will turn your sauce black.
Oh, I see.
Just a note about the wine. You'll see the label later. I can't remember what it is, but it turned out to be a really nice bottle of Marsala. And, you know, if you order veal Marsala, chicken Marsala at restaurants, at least in Jersey restaurants, you're usually going to get a reduced sweet Marsala and some kind of stock base. Um, the wine is going to dictate the quality of your sauce. So this bottle was around $15, $16, perfectly drinkable if you like sipping on Marsala wine, and it made all the difference. Here I'm just slicing through the chanterelles, keeping them pretty large because we're gonna roast these mushrooms for 10 to 15 minutes. And you want to cut everything roughly the same size. Alright, and the mirepoix is a brunoise, really small dice of shallots and garlic, about equal parts, and also some stripped thyme leaves. And you just run your knife through. You want to get the garlic pretty finely chopped. You shouldn't be able to see any in the final dish. Okay, so here we're just going to make an egg wash. This is 3 eggs, a splash of water, and we're going to season the egg wash. I don't usually season the flour when I do standard breading for cutlets or fish. You're not going to get even seasoning that way, but if you season the egg wash, then whatever you're breading is going to be pretty nicely seasoned. And obviously we're going to season at the end as well. So I divided the blackfish into the loin and the belly flap. The loin, the shoulder piece is will end up being a pretty nice presentation. So standard breading procedure is you dust it in flour, pat off all the excess, dip in egg wash, run out the excess egg, and then into the panko or whatever breadcrumb you're using. This is a panko breadcrumb, which works for any dish that calls for breadcrumbs, as far as I'm concerned. So the flour gives the egg something to hold on to, and then the egg obviously allows the breadcrumb to stick. And you can do this, maybe half an hour in advance and just hold it in the fridge. Here I'm just slicing a few pieces of butter. These are going to go in the sauce at the end. That has to be cold. And here we're going to roast the mushrooms off. So it's grapeseed oil and a little drizzle of olive oil. Smoking hot pan, and you want to keep that heat very high. What's going to happen is first the water has to cook out of the mushrooms, and you salt and pepper it. Salt's also going to help draw the moisture out. And you just let this roast for maybe 5, 6, 7 minutes. And once the water comes out and once the water cooks off, see right here, you get a little bit of color. This is when you add your mirepoix, which in this case is your shallots and garlic and thyme. and you also add a couple pads of butter. So now that the water cooked out of the mushrooms, now you're actually roasting it, and you're going to achieve both color and some fond at the bottom of the pan, which is going to give richness and depth to your sauce. And this is standard. If you're roasting bones for a protein-based sauce, same thing. Alright, so here is the Marsala that I use. We're going to go about a cup and a quarter total. So you see that fond at the bottom of the pan? That's what you want. You want to bring it to the edge of burning and then deglaze. Okay. And then use your wooden spatula and just scrape the bottom. And all those crystallized bits are going to dissolve into the alcohol, and that is what separates a crappy sauce from a really flavorful sauce. Now the wine has to reduce down to a glaze or to a syrup. You want to cook all the alcohol off before you add your stock. In this case, we're using a pretty light chicken stock, low sodium. This is homemade, but you can buy low sodium stock. And then we're going to reduce the stock down to a glaze. About a cup of Marsala, a cup of stock. And you can adjust the amount, depending on how much mushrooms you have. And we're going to lightly season, let it reduce. And then here's where you're going to taste. Every 20 seconds you're going to taste it, so you don't over season or under season. Here's the other garnish. Some asparagus in a dry pan. Let it go for 2-3 minutes in a dry pan, and a splash of water, and then a drizzle of oil, salt, pepper. Asparagus and mushrooms go very well together, but the main purpose of these asparagus is to cushion the fish from the Marsala sauce. Now traditionally in a veal Marsala, you would put the veal cutlets back into the sauce. It's meant to be like a marry dish, but in this case I want to keep the fish almost like a schnitzel, keep it crispy. And the cold butter goes in off the heat, and we stir it in. And how far you reduce the sauce is really dependent on the nature of both the wine and the stock. So in this case, this Marsala is very dry. It's not as strong as some of the cooking Marsalas that people are used to seeing. The stock likewise is very light as well, so we reduced it all the way down. Okay, so that is held in reserve, and now we're gonna fry the fish. So grapeseed oil, relatively hot pan, you just throw a piece of breadcrumb in there. If it floats and it turns color, then the oil is ready. And when you're pan frying a piece of fish or anything that has one side thicker, the far side right now is much thicker than the leading edge. You want to tilt the pan so you want to pay attention to the thick side to make sure that it's cooked through. And we're going to flip this fish once. Once you flip it, you season the side you just cooked immediately. That's the only time salt and pepper is going to stick to the outside of the breading because of the hot oil. If you season 20 seconds after this, nothing's going to happen. The salt's just going to fall off. Here we salt, and you don't want to use a coarse sea salt or anything like that. This is like just a regular kosher salt, but fine sea salt is fine. Um, just remember, kosher salt by volume is half the sodium, and generally speaking, I like using one type of salt for everything, and this way I know exactly how much seasoning I'm putting onto the food. Um, there's no surprises. Here, we drain the fish and leave the side that was last cooked up so we can season that side. This is pretty important. You know, you don't want to wait to season any piece of fried fish or breaded cutlets. Okay, so here's the plating, very simple. Just mound your mushroom marsala sauce, middle of the plate. You almost always want to start in the middle unless you're doing some stupid modern plating. Just center it in the middle. The asparagus planks go on top. You want all the spears facing the same direction, and then the fish is going to rest on top of the asparagus. Oh, right there. And just finish with a little bit of good olive oil just around the edges, and you see it kind of gives a little contrast around the edge of the plate. Looks pretty nice, and it adds good flavor too. And that's it. That's the dish. My cousin's gonna demonstrate. Some of that sauce. Oh my god, what are you doing? Fish dropped. How's that sauce? It's good? Is it too reduced? No? How's the fish cooked?
Perfect.
It's meaty, right? Yeah, I apologize about the focus. I'm not a cameraman. But it's not like, is it too salty? No, it's good. Good. Okay, and here's a still photo. My cousin's been a huge help, both cooking, fishing, and filming. Tautog really stands up to this sauce. You know, it's a white fish, but it's very meaty. It has a lot of substance. So, in any case, if you like what you see, please subscribe. Any questions, fishing, cooking, leave them down below. I will answer all questions. Thank you.